I arrived 5 minutes early, holding the pie with both hands so it wouldn't tip. I had wrapped the edges in foil, like always, to keep the crust from going soft. Everett loved the way I made it, just enough sweetness, just enough salt. His favorite, since he was 10. I stepped into the house without knocking. It used to be mine, too. The smell of roast and wine and perfume hit me first, followed by a room full of laughter I wasn't part of. His in-laws filled the space like they owned it. His wife, Clarissa, stood near the buffet chatting with her father. Rosa. Her mother was already seated, smiling into a glass of red wine. I looked around. No one looked back, except for one chair still empty, at the head of the table. I took a slow step toward it, balancing the pie carefully, already wondering if they'd remembered to put out the dessert plates. Everett moved fast. Too fast for it to be casual. He blocked my path with a smile that didn't touch his eyes. "That's for Rosa," he said quietly. "You can sit in the kitchen." I blinked. "What?" He didn't repeat himself. He didn't need to. I didn't move. So he did. A light push. Not hard, not violent, but deliberate. I stumbled backward and hit the corner of the hutch. My hand knocked the pie box, but I kept it from falling. My knee cracked against the wall as I steadied myself. No one gasped. No one reached for me. Clarissa said something about the roast drying. Rosa sipped her wine. Someone laughed at a story being told across the room. I straightened both hands, still holding the pie. He didn't even look at me. I turned around and walked out. Down the hall, through the door, past the porch, I built into the driveway I helped him pay for. I didn't slam the door. I didn't cry. I just walked. The foil on the pie was still warm against my fingers when I reached my car. I sat on the porch with the pie beside me, untouched. The foil had started to lose its warmth, just like the ache in my knee had settled into a dull, steady throb. I pressed my hand to it, not to ease the pain, but to feel something, anything, to prove I was still here. Across the yard, the porch light flickered. That old bulb had needed changing for weeks. I'd mentioned it to Everett last time he dropped by. He'd nodded, distracted already, halfway back to his car. It wasn't always like this. When Everett was 5, I worked nights at the oncology unit and days cleaning at the school so he could go to a better district. I used to nap in my car between shifts, dreaming of nothing except making it to payday. I never complained. Not once. Because he was worth it. When he was 15 and wanted to apply for early college prep, I didn't have the money. So I sold the only thing I had left from Franklin, my engagement ring. He never knew. He just beamed when that acceptance letter came in the mail and said, "Told you I'd get in, Mom." At his high school graduation, he pulled me in tight, cap still crooked, eyes glassy with pride. "You'll always live with me, Mom. You're the reason I made it." I didn't ask for a promise. He gave it freely. Now, 20 years later, that same boy told me without flinching that I wasn't welcome at his table. And maybe it wasn't the push that hurt the most. It was the silence, the ease with which he erased me. I leaned back against the porch post and looked up at the sky. No stars tonight. Just the hum of distant traffic and that flickering bulb. The pie sat there beside me, a sad reminder that even tradition can be unwelcome. I wrapped it back up, placed it in the fridge, and turned off the light. But before I went to bed, I opened the hallway cabinet and noticed the folder was missing. I keep my important papers in a fireproof lockbox in the hallway cabinet: birth certificates, Franklin's discharge papers, the deed to the house. I hadn't opened it in months, but something pulled me there that night, as if my bones already knew what my mind hadn't caught up to. The box wasn't locked. Inside the envelope labeled home, title and deed was gone. So were the notarized letters Franklin and I signed when we refinanced in 2001. I stood there for a long moment trying to reason with myself. Maybe I moved them. Maybe I gave them to my lawyer during tax season. But that wasn't right. Then I remembered. 3 weeks ago, Everett had stopped by, unexpectedly holding a manila folder and a Starbucks cup. He said something about taxes, about needing my signature for a routine filing, so we wouldn't get flagged. I'd been cleaning the baseboard's knees, sore hands, cramping. I didn't read much, just where to sign. He kissed my cheek and left before the ink dried. I never thought I'd have to question my own child's intentions. The next morning, I drove to the county recorder's office. I didn't call first. I didn't bring Everett. I just went. The clerk behind the counter was polite, efficient. She printed the updated records without a word. It took less than 2 minutes. When she handed me the copy, I scanned the lines twice. Then again. The name Everett Mornay was now listed under co-owner. So was Rosa Martinez. Mine was still there, but it was no longer alone, no longer primary. There was a new clause too, one I hadn't seen before. Any changes to the property now required all parties' signatures. My throat tightened. My hands didn't shake. I just folded the papers neatly, thanked the woman behind the glass, and walked to the parking lot in silence. The sun was hot on the hood of my car. I rested my hand there for a second, grounding myself. Then I unlocked the door, slid into the driver's seat, and pulled out my phone. I dialed a number I hadn't used in years. Thomas Greer used to say that it wasn't paranoia if you were right. He handled Franklin's will when we were barely scraping by, and came back again when the house was finally paid off. We hadn't spoken much, but I kept his number tucked behind an old photo of Franklin in my wallet just in case. I called that number from the car. He picked up on the second ring. His voice was slower now, lower than I remembered, but steady as ever. I told him I needed his help. I didn't explain everything over the phone, just enough to make him pause. He said to come in Monday at 10. Quiet. No fee for Franklin, he said. And for you. I hung up and didn't cry. Back home, I opened the cedar chest in my bedroom. Beneath the quilts and the letters and one old Easter card from Everett crayon, faded but still saying, I love you. Mommy was a sealed brown envelope. Inside it was the original deed. Not a copy. Not a scanned version. The original drafted and notarized in 1998 with a handwritten clause Franklin had insisted on. No transfer of ownership permitted without written, signed, and witnessed consent by the primary title holder, Callista Mornay. No one ever bothered to check if I kept a backup, and Everett, for all his boldness, had never asked. But I had more than paper. 2 years ago, I'd recorded Everett on my phone. We were on the porch drinking coffee. He'd been bragging about some loan deal, and I'd said, half joking, "Don't you go selling this house out from under me one day." And he laughed. Then said, "Mom, come on, this house is yours. It'll always be in your name." I'd saved that file under morning coffee. I hadn't listened to it since. I played it again that night. The sound of his voice made my stomach turn, not because of what he said, but because I no longer believed a word of it. On Monday, I'd walk into Thomas's office with more than just proof. I'd walk in ready. She didn't call first, just rang the bell like she belonged there. I opened the door to find Rosa on my porch, wearing oversized sunglasses and holding a plastic folder in one hand like it was a clutch. She didn't wait to be invited in, just stepped past me commenting on the azaleas like we were old friends. Everett said you'd want to get a head start. She began setting the folder down on the entryway table. You know, before the move-in. I stood still. Move-in. She smiled as if I were a child needing a reminder. We're planning for late July. It'll be easier for the kids before school starts again. Everett mentioned you'd be shifting into the guest room so we can convert the master into a nursery eventually. I said nothing. She wandered toward the study, glancing around like she was already measuring curtains. We'll need this space, of course. Hope you're okay giving it up. It's too dark to be a bedroom, but Everett says we can knock down the side wall to open it up. She ran her fingers along the bookshelf. These old photos, so sweet. but we'll probably pack them up to keep things minimal. Clean lines, you know. The fake sweetness in her voice scraped against every nerve in my body. She wasn't being cruel, just efficient, polite, like someone talking logistics about a hotel room that needed repainting, not the home where I had lived, grieved, raised a son, and buried a husband. I'll let you process, she said on her way out. We'll send a painter by next week. Neutral tones, don't worry. When the door shut behind her, I didn't curse. I didn't yell. I walked to the study, opened the bottom drawer, pulled out the folders marked Legal Everett, School Franklin, Pension. That night, I boxed every photo, every letter, every certificate, every trace of myself that had quietly lived inside those walls. And I set them in the hallway, ready not for storage, but for defense. Thomas's office hadn't changed. Same bookshelves, same leather chairs that creaked when you sat too deep. He greeted me with a nod and a file already opened on his desk. No small talk, just work. That's why I trusted him. I laid the envelope down and slid over the recording on a flash drive. He listened with one earbud in while skimming the deed. After a few minutes, he looked up. We have more than enough, he said. They won't see it coming. The process wasn't loud. No courtrooms, no confrontations, just quiet signatures, legal language, and a new title drawn up by someone who still remembered my maiden name. We voided the revised deed, the one Everett filed without my knowledge, and reinstated the original with full ownership in my name. We added a new clause, one I'd thought about for years but never acted on. Upon my passing, the property would transfer in full to the Eastbrook Single Mothers Scholarship Fund. No family disputes, no fighting over who gets the walls I painted, the garden I tended, or the roof I paid off in monthly checks while my back ached from double shifts. Thomas filed the documents before lunch. By early afternoon, the county office confirmed receipt. Afterward, I walked 2 blocks to the city office and filed a formal change of occupancy. No shared living, no joint tenancy. The woman behind the desk looked confused when I clarified I live alone, and I plan to keep it that way. I thanked her and stepped outside into the warm light. The sun felt different on my skin, less like a burden, more like a shield. He didn't knock. The sound of the door hitting the frame made me look up from my chair in the study. Everett stood there, red-faced fists clenched like a boy who didn't get his way. "What did you do?" he snapped. The bank froze the refinance. They said the title reverted. Rosa's parents were going to invest. I didn't stand. I didn't raise my voice. "This is my home," I said calmly. "You gave it away too easily." His jaw tightened. "You went behind my back." I looked at him for a long moment. "No, you went behind mine." He scoffed, pacing the room like he owned it. Rosa appeared a few seconds later, clicking in on those sharp heels holding her phone like it was a weapon. "This isn't legal," she said. "You can't just erase people from property like that. We'll take you to court." I reached down beside the chair and lifted a plain folder. Nothing dramatic. Just paper. I handed it to Everett. In there is the original deed, the audio recording, and the signed documents you handed me that day on the porch, the ones you said were for taxes. He didn't open it. Rosa grabbed it from him, flipped through a few pages, then froze. She recognized the notary stamp, the signature, his handwriting. Everett took a breath like he wanted to say something noble or final, but all that came out was, "You didn't have to do this." I finally stood, meeting his eyes. "And you didn't have to lie." I walked them both to the door without another word. Rosa was still talking, threats, questions, noise, but I'd stopped listening. I opened the door. They stepped through. Then I closed it, quietly, firmly, and locked it, just once. They didn't come back, not physically, but the consequences did. Within a week, I overheard the whispers at the grocery store. People talk when something goes wrong, and Everett had built his life too publicly to hide the unraveling. His business deal, the one Rosa's parents had backed, fell through completely. Word was, the refinance was a key part of the leverage. Without the house, there was no collateral. Without collateral, there was no investor confidence. And without that, Rosa's family wanted nothing to do with it. They say Rosa moved into her parents' condo for a while. Everett stayed behind making calls that went nowhere. I didn't ask. I didn't reach out. I just kept my coffee warm and my porch quiet. Then one morning, I found a thick envelope in the mail with a return address I recognized, the Eastbrook Single Mothers Scholarship Fund. Inside was a formal letter, typed neatly on letterhead and signed in ink. We are proud to inform you that following your contribution and designation, we have renamed our annual housing assistance grant the Callista Mornay Legacy Award. I held the paper in both hands for a long time. Franklin would have smiled at that. He always said, if you have more than you need, you plant it. Let it grow somewhere it matters. So I called them. 2 weeks later, I started volunteering twice a week at the center. Mostly, I listened. Sometimes I helped them write applications or sort through paperwork they didn't understand. And when they asked how I managed to hold on to my house, I just smiled and said, I didn't let anyone else write the ending. The house felt different now. Not just mine again, but mine, in a new way. I walked through it slowly each night. No longer expecting knocks or intrusions, just peace. One afternoon, as I was sorting the mail, I saw another envelope. A small one. No return address. Inside was a folded piece of paper in my granddaughter's handwriting. Marcia came over on a Thursday morning. I brewed coffee strong the way we used to make it back when our kids were in diapers and sleep was a luxury. We sat out on the patio, the garden blooming around us. I'd started planting again. Small things. Basil mint something red I couldn't pronounce. They thrived in the sun without asking much. Marcia stirred her cup and watched me for a while before she said it. You going to let him back in? I didn't answer right away. The breeze moved through the chimes Franklin had hung years ago, and for a second, I could hear the silence between them louder than her question. I finally said, not until he sees me as someone worth inviting to the table. She nodded. Didn't push. That's why we'd stayed friends all these years. She knew some wounds didn't need wrapping, just air. After she left, I cleaned the mugs, wiped down the counter, and swept the porch. I wasn't expecting mail, but I checked anyway. There it was. A small white envelope smudged at the corners. No stamp, no return address. Just my name written in careful, slanted letters I hadn't seen in far too long. I opened it slowly. Inside was a folded piece of notebook paper, my granddaughter's handwriting. Sorry, I didn't say anything. I love you, Grandma. That was it. No explanation, no apology for what she hadn't done. Just those words. And somehow they held more than I could name. I placed the note on the fridge with the same magnet that used to hold her drawings. Then I stood in the middle of my kitchen, the light catching the hardwood floors, the hum of the dishwasher in the background. I didn't feel empty. I felt like I was finally standing in a space that didn't ask me to shrink. The next morning, I opened my front door to 3 women and 5 children from the shelter program, laughing arms full of grocery bags, ready to cook. The oven timer went off just as I was setting out the plates. The smell of pecan pie filled the kitchen, warm, buttery, rich. Same recipe, same pan. But this time, I wasn't baking for anyone who expected it. I laid out the table with mismatched dishes and cloth napkins I'd sewn years ago. Nothing fancy, just real, just mine. At noon, the front door opened with a soft knock followed by laughter. 3 women from the shelter program stepped inside, each carrying something: a salad, a casserole, a toddler half asleep on her shoulder. The kids ran in, first wide-eyed and already asking about dessert. We filled the table Everett once tried to hand away like it was his to give. No one talked over anyone. No one fought for the best seat. Everyone simply made room. The food disappeared fast. Seconds were served. A spilled cup was cleaned up without fuss. One little girl drew me a picture with a crooked heart and wrote "thank you" in bright purple crayon. When the pie was finally sliced, I waited until every plate had at least one bite of it before I took mine. Someone passed me the last slice with a grin. And I smiled back. "This seat is mine," I said, mostly to myself. Not because I claimed it. Because I built it. Because I stayed. Because I knew now that the table didn't matter nearly as much as who I shared it with. As the sun began to dip behind the trees and the children dragged blankets onto the living room floor, I poured coffee for the mothers and sat back in my chair, full not just from food, but from something far older and deeper. The house no longer echoed with what was lost. It rang with what had been chosen. And when I stood to clear the table, I didn't do it alone.